Welcome to another Inside Story. I'm Andrew Womack, and this is where we just go behind the scenes and share things with you that we would probably never put on my television program, but just awesome things that God is doing. And I tell you, it's a blessing. There's so much happening in this ministry that there's just no way we could put everything out. And so that's what the Inside Story is about. Most of our times we are interviewing people within the ministry and showing you things happening, but today I've got the real privilege and honor of having Pat Bradley with me, and he is the head of Crisis Aid International. Is that the proper title?
Yep.
And I met Pat through very good friends of mine, Charlie and Jill LeBlanc, and they actually connected with him, I think in St. Louis. I'll let him give all the details, but that's how we met many years ago. And the more I hear about him, and then he's got this book out, and we're going to be promoting this today and talking about this, but I haven't read it. My wife read this and told me nearly every word of it. And I tell you, Pat is a modern day apostle. He is doing things, and God is using him in supernatural ways. And I would encourage you to get this book, but Jamie has told me so much about this. So Pat, welcome, and I'm glad that you're with us on our Inside Story.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here today.
So real quickly, maybe you could talk about how we first met. I gave just a brief introduction, but how did we connect?
Sure. Charlie and Jill LeBlanc are friends of ours from way back in the 80s, mid-80s. We've known them a long time. And so we invited them to come to Ethiopia to see the work, and they came over. Actually, they came straight from your UK conference. Then they flew to Ethiopia and spent the week with us on the ground, and came back, and you had asked them about what was going on, what they saw, and so they shared what they did. And then lo and behold, one day, in the mail comes a check from Andrew Womack Ministries, just about floored me, and it was extremely generous, and that's how we met. And I picked up the phone, and you called me. You answered your phone.
I remember Charlie and Jill showed me pictures and stuff and talked about what you were doing, and it's amazing. We want to make sure and cover some of those things, because really you are impacting thousands and thousands of people, and you're going places that are no-go zones where it's dangerous. And we want to talk about some of those things. But before we get into all that, how did you get started on this? What did God do in your life that changed you and gave you something to be able to share with other people?
Well, it all started with a divorce, if you will. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and go into all the details in the book. So
How many years were you an alcoholic?
Let's see. Probably I started drinking when I was 12, and stopped when I was, I think, 30, 31 years of age.
So were you not raised in a Christian environment?
Catholic environment. So an hour every Sunday.
Yep.
Yeah. So
12 years old.
12 years old. Yeah, I was a wild child.
How did you get the booze?
A friend of mine's dad had it in the basement, and we discovered it one day, and that's how it all started from there. And I thought it was fun, but it went downhill from there. But so I met my wife, we got married, and she had divorced me because of my drinking.
Because of the alcohol?
Because of the alcoholism.
Now, did you have children at that time?
We had 2 children. I think they were 4 years old and 2 years old. And so we got divorced. I accepted a new position. I became successful in my career. Prior to that, we had to borrow money every week to feed my family. So we were dirt poor.
So when you say that you were an alcoholic, were you a functional alcoholic? Were you able to work? Or
I was, very much functional. I worked. In fact, when my son was born, I had 2 jobs and was going to night school full time, and still being an active alcoholic. So, and so anyway, we got divorced. I had given my life to Christ at a church service, and
now this was after she divorced you.
Yeah, after she divorced me,
okay.
I went into this church, a mega church, and I go into all the details. And it was crazy, Andrew. It was so crazy. I never experienced anything like this. I saw people in church. I mean, there were thousands of people, and they were standing, were raising their hands and singing, and men had suits on. It just was. I went there to try to get. I thought my ex-wife was going to a cult because of the way my kids were talking. So I went there with the intention to get evidence so I could go to court and get custody of my kids.
You weren't seeking God when you went.
No, not at all. Not one bit.
Wow.
And something happened at that service that I had ended up not that day, that was Sunday, but on Tuesday they had another service. And I gave my life to Christ then, and that's everything changed instantly in my life.
So did the Lord really convict you during that one service? Or what?
Here's what happened. So we're in this church service, and the worship's going on, and I mean, it was packed. It felt like I had to walk a mile just to get from the parking lot to the church. So by the time I got to the front door, I was really mad. I was angry. It was hot. I was sweaty. It was middle of July. And there's my ex-wife standing up there, and I looked at her, and she started to say something. I said, shut up. I don't want to hear a word from you. Just shut up. So we turned around. We walked in, and all these people, and, it was a big auditorium. And so there was like 2 seats, the only 2 seats we could find. We had to crawl over a bunch of people to get to them. And so we got there, we sat down, and then they started back up with the worship. And so we stood there, and I'm fuming, just fuming at what's going on. But I see these television cameras, and I'm thinking, oh, this is a cult for sure. So I'm trying to make, memories of what's going on. And then the worship was over, and we sat down, and this man stands up, and he gives a message in tongues.
Oh, wow.
Now, what's weird is I knew instantly it was tongues, but I'd never heard of tongues. Somehow I knew that.
Huh.
And so he sat down, and a pastor explained that, this is the gift of tongues, and I do believe I have that interpretation from God. And as soon as he said that, there's like this cloud came over me. And I remember so vividly, it's like I couldn't see the people in front of me. I couldn't see my ex-wife. This cloud came over me, and I heard, how many times do I need to call you?
Wow.
I said it 3 times. And then the cloud went away. And this sounds insane, but I found myself sobbing uncontrollably. Now, half my brain's sobbing, my other half of brain's going, what is wrong with you? Have you lost your mind?
And was Susan sitting next to you? Your
yeah, she kept
ex-wife?
going like this. He's crazy. Who's this guy? But
I bet you. Now, she was born again at this time.
she was born again,
Did
yeah.
she get born again after she divorced, or what was it?
No, she gave her life to Christ, I think, when she was 12, and so she kind of got
So
away.
what's she
after
doing
met
marrying
me.
a guy like you?
She lost her sanity. But anyway, so he did an altar call right then. And I was afraid. My pride wouldn't let me go because I was afraid somebody I know might be here and would see me sobbing like a baby. But people are sitting around looking at me like, what's wrong with this guy?
I understand what you're saying. I'm not critical. But this amazes me that you weren't ashamed to be an alcoholic. Right. But you were ashamed that somebody would see you cry.
That's right.
Selective.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But that was a drug-affected brain before and then afterwards.
And so 2 days later, what happened?
2 days later, they talk about the conviction of the Holy Spirit. Well, man, when I got home after church, wow, it was like heavy. It was like a wet blanket on me for the next 2 days. And I went back to church that Tuesday at a Tuesday service. And then when he gave the altar call, man, I practically ran down there and I got on my knees.
You weren't going to spend another 2 days.
No, I wouldn't have spent another minute under that conviction.
That's awesome.
But instantaneously, it was like, it was gone, and there was this freedom, a freedom that I had never known, I'd never experienced because I was I was addicted. And there was this freedom. It's like the love of God gives a freedom that we can't experience unless we give our life to Christ.
Amen.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome.
That's how it all started.
So that was, I'm sure, great for you. How did it affect your ex-wife, and what was the result?
Well, so how that story goes, so we, she was glad I did it. And so a couple weeks later, I was in advertising marketing, and I had a meeting with her boss, but I didn't know any of this was happening. So I go to her company, big Fortune 500 company. Receptionist says, her assistant will come up and get you. So a couple minutes later, I heard his door open. I turned around, and this was my ex-wife. I was like, this is the assistant to the person I'm supposed to meet. And I'm looking at her and going, ooh, she looks pretty good. Now, prior to that, after she divorced me, I hated her with a passion.
Really?
Oh, I did because of what she did to me. That's the selfishness of my mind. It's not what I did to them. was what she did to me.
Boy, that's awesome. You know, if you really get born again, that's one of the things that changes. Instead of looking at everything just from your standpoint, you start seeing things differently.
Yes.
You probably never thought about what you were doing to your wife and family.
No, never crossed my mind. Thought never occurred to me. But
man, that's a great testimony that God changed your heart.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I saw her and I'm like, wow, she's beautiful. And so
you didn't know that before, or you did? You just weren't focused on it.
Yeah, I did, and so we went. I met with her boss, and Sue escorted me upstairs, and we talked in the lobby for a few minutes. I said, "Hey, you want to have coffee or something like that?" She said, "Yeah, let's do." And so a couple weeks later, we met somewhere, and I think it was like 6 months after that we ended up getting remarried.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Was it an easy transition going back to being married, or is it like having to start all over again?
It was so easy, it was ridiculous, but it was so different. You know, the stress and the tension and none of that was there, and it was like the love of God was the center of our life, and everything just flowed out of that. And I'm not going to say everything was, you know, for the last 40 years has been perfect.
Now, has it been 40 years since you got remarried?
We were married 6.5 years, got divorced, and then 40 or 41 years that we've been the second time.
You're older than you look. God's been good to you.
Thank you. You got a good makeup artist, too.
So I'm sure that there's a lot of stories there, but we want to talk about your ministry now.
Sure.
And how did that get started?
Well, that started with the night I got saved. I went in the church at a bookstore, and there was a book called God's Smuggler, and I was intrigued by the title, and so I bought it, and I didn't own a Bible at this point in time. So I took it home and started reading, and I couldn't put this book down. And so it was like 3 a.m, and I'm like, I got to get to work the next day. And so I came home after work the next day and finished the book, and I just prayed a very simple prayer. I said, Lord, if you could ever use me to help people that are being persecuted, I'm just making myself available.
Awesome.
That's all I prayed.
That's all God wants. It's just your availability,
That's
not
all
your
he wants,
ability.
Yeah, and that was the seed. And God took that seed, and today we're helping. I mean, we've helped over 4 million people since we started. So
you do a lot of stuff in Ethiopia and Africa and stuff. How did you get started on that?
Well, we started in South Sudan during the war, and we went on a fact-finding trip there in the year 2000. I was on a board of an organization that dealt with Christian persecution, and spent 2 weeks on the ground and heard the personal stories and saw the genocide, and it was as you can imagine, was life-changing. I mean, when
this
I came
was
home,
a war zone, right?
This was an active war zone.
So you were actually were you in danger during that time over there?
Probably at times, but you know, you don't think about it that way. You're just there and just to take
you may not
in.
think about it that way. There's a lot of people that would think about it that way. So
yeah, I guess God
there was a
wired
grace
me.
of God on your life.
Oh, no question, it was the grace, and still is it. It's all by the grace of God. And so we started, our first relief trip was in September of 2000. And then we did a few more in South Sudan, and then God just started opening things up to us. And like 8 weeks after 9/11, we were on the border in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and that led it to us working 12 years in Afghanistan, feeding people, helping with girls' schools, church planting, and Bible school translation, big project. So we had 20 Afghan evangelists that worked with. We supported them full time for about six years, I think it was. And then in the year 2003, this is how this is when it really kicked off. Was I was in my office, and it was at lunchtime. I saw this internet headline that said 14 million Ethiopians at risk of death by starvation. And I mean, boom, just like that. I knew God said go. And so I started asking around, and 30 days later, I showed up in the Capitol. And on a yellow Post-it note, I had a phone number. Actually, I didn't know where the phone number went to. I didn't know a soul. And in 30 days, I couldn't find anything, but I just knew God said go, and so I went. And the phone number turned out to be to a church, a major church organization that had a big development wing. And so spent the next 6 days driving through the bush of Ethiopia and seeing the famine conditions that were just unspeakable. I've never seen anything like this. People literally dying because they didn't have enough food. And so we started there, and how we started was what we learned was a therapeutic feeding center is like an emergency room in the bush, and it's for dealing with severely malnourished people, especially children. So during the 6 days, I stopped and like with Doctors Without Borders and several others, and learn about pretty much what you need to do. And so on the day 6, we pulled into this village, and on the side of a hill, there's 250 mothers sitting there, and they all had children that were severely malnourished. Had at least one, some had 2 or 3. And when I use that term, that means that child is going to die 100% of the time if they don't get help. And so the elders came out and they were pleading and begging me, please do something, no one's come here. And it's like, I mean, it was such a remote place. And I said, we're going to build a TFC, a therapeutic feeding center, and we're here to help. And at that time, we had $350 in our bank account, and I knew it would cost us about $100,000. And our mailing list was about 40 people, and most of that was family and very close friends.
Now, you had already started Crisis Aid International.
Yeah, we did start Crisis Aid
International. But you only had 40 people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I was working full time at that time.
So you're pretty much funding it yourself.
Yeah, in the early days we were, and so I came back, and the crazy thing is that we only had that amount of money in the bank, and I sat down and called my board and explained what happened and told them what I committed to, and they thought I was insane. I'm listening to myself thinking, I think I'm insane too, but over the next few weeks, God brought that money in, and today I'm sitting here, I still can't tell you how that came in. We sent out a letter, we just start talking to people, and money just start coming in.
Now, how many people do you think that you have fed? I saw something that you have put out tons of food.
We put out, almost 28 million tons of food.
28 million tons?
Yeah, over 100 million meals. It breaks out to over 100 million meals.
How many people do you feed on a monthly basis?
We're feeding presently about 10,000 people every month. So.
And this is where?
In East Africa, in Ethiopia.
Just in that one country?
Mm-hmm.
And you've also been rescuing girls, not only girls, but children out of the sex trade. How did that get started?
That started in Ethiopia, actually, and it started from a conversation I was having with a guy that had a ministry to street children. And I heard God's voice speak into my ear. He said, ask him about prostitution. And I kind of ignored it. I remember thinking, that's crazy. But then a couple minutes later, the voice said the same thing. And then I figured it was God. So I asked him, and he tells me about this big red light district. He said there's thousands of girls that are trapped there. And so I asked him, will you take us there tonight? And he did. He said, sure, I'll take you there. And so we go down there, and this is what the world would look like if there was no God. There was pure hell. There was open sewage, and it was these girls live in these tin shacks and like 6 feet by 8 feet. And as far as you can see, they're just tin shacks up and down every street. And the odor, the smell, but the lack of hope was so permeated the air. It's like you just walk in there and you just feel this thing. And a couple years later, I just finally realized there's no hope here. And without hope, how do you have life? And these girls had no life. And all
many of them came into this prostitution and as young kids.
As many of them came in as young kids. Yeah, well, I mean, the first girl we rescued, she was 11 years old when she was forced into this red light district. Her parents had passed away and she had no surviving relatives. And so that first night we went in there, we came out of there with our very first girl from the sex industry.
And you didn't have anywhere to put her. So how did you do it?
We had no plan. We went down there to see. And so we ended up talking to a group of girls. There was like 6 of them, and we led them to the Lord. And this one girl, God spoke to me so clearly, he said, baptize her. And so we did, and we took her out into the alley, and I mean, there was a lot of people around, and somebody found a pan of water for us. So I had her bend over and pouring water over her. I've never baptized anyone, and so I didn't know what to say, other than I knew you're supposed to say, I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's all I remember saying. And we got done, and she stood up, and this water's dripping down her face and onto her shirt, and the biggest, brightest smile. This girl just smiles. And there was such a visible transformation in this girl that everything got quiet. People saw, they didn't know what they saw. I knew instantly what I saw. But everything got quiet, and this girl beamed because the love of God, I mean, Jesus was in her heart. 2 minutes ago, he wasn't.
So 5 years, from 11 to 16 of being in prostitution, and instantly she was set free and changed.
Instantly. At that complete change in body language, facial
You know, that
expression.
gets you addicted to that, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I guess after seeing something like that, have you continued to minister to the kids in the sex trade?
Oh, yes. Our work in the sex trafficking is exponentially grown, and to include about 4,700 girls and children that we've either rescued from as victims of trafficking or preventing them from being abducted or taken by pimps and perverts.
And so when you say you rescue them, do you have homes? How do you do this?
Yeah, we have homes in Ethiopia. We have one home now. We just opened. It'll house 100 girls, and has room for 40 children because most of these girls have children, and for a staff of about 30. And then we also have a home that we're going to be opening in Grand Rapids, September 1 of this year. And
Okay, so I want to talk about what's happening here in the States, but just give us an overview of what you have in Ethiopia. You feed people.
We
You
feed
say
people.
10,000?
We have 2 pediatric hospitals. Last year we saw around 70,000.
And you built
patient
these
visits.
hospitals?
Yes, we built those
And
there was no medical care in these areas.
And so how do you staff that? Do you actually employ doctors?
Oh yes, yeah. We hire doctors, nurses, and what you would need to run a hospital.
And then you've got that one home that'll house 100 people. Do you have more than one?
Not anymore in there, just that one home. We
So
decided to go with one big one because we're looking at getting 15,000 girls rescued, and we're looking at generations to come. And so rents there just got exorbitant. We couldn't, it just didn't work for us. And so we decided, let's build this big home. And that's what we did. And so we have big water projects in Ethiopia, 2 pediatric hospitals, an orphanage, very much involved in sex trafficking. We have a pastor support program for 100 pastors that are working in an area where there's radical Islam, Muslims.
So you support pastors
We
in
support
their
pastors
ministry.
and provide training for them.
What is your budget? Do you mind me asking?
No, it's about $5 million a year.
$5 million a year. That's a long cry from having $350 in the bank.
It is, but we need 20 million. So
Yeah, and so you've also not only done this over in Ethiopia, and you mentioned Afghanistan, Sudan, and all those places, but you have a ministry here in the States that for those of you who are partners with us, we are trying to partner with Pat to bring this same thing to Colorado Springs. So your main place is in St. Louis, that's where you're from, but you've also started another one in Grand Rapids with a friend of mine, Dwayne Vanderclark.
Yes.
So what are you doing in the U.S.?
So we have 2 programs here. One we call CAP, and that stands for our Child Anti-Exploitation Program. And this is a program that was birthed out of 8 years of having a home for trafficking victims in St. Louis. We kept asking ourselves, how do we prevent this? How do we prevent this? And so we also work really close with law enforcement. So the sergeant who was in charge of sex crimes and internet crimes against children and our director of the program came to me with an idea. And they said, we want to talk about preventing, how we keep these kids from becoming victims. And so we said, okay, let's try and see what happens. And so after a year, the results they had were phenomenal. And so now we have, I believe it's 9 employees working full-time in different police departments who are working side by side with their detective bureaus. And when they find these children doing really dangerous things on the internet, we can intervene and start working with them and their parents and their families.
So you have a program in St. Louis that actually houses girls that have been sexually abused, but you're also working with the police to prevent it. And man, that's awesome.
Yeah, so the home in St. Louis, we had to close because of COVID, and we were partnering with a religious institution whose board did not want to go back into that. So,
so you don't have the home now?
Not in St. Louis, but there's going to be one in Grand Rapids.
All right, and so this program that you've put into place in St. Louis is Dwayne Vanderclark, Resurrection Life, and Grand Rapids. What are they doing up there?
Well, they have 3 CAP offices and 3 different police departments, and they've putting on the finishing touches of a gorgeous home that'll house 20 victims, 10 for one side's for minors, the other side's for adults. So that's
what we're wanting to do. We're wanting to do something similar. I don't know if it'll work out exactly that way, but what is your vision? It's not just for Grand Rapids, St. Louis, and we're trying to get something going in Colorado Springs, but what's your vision for the U.S.?
My vision for the U.S. and specifically for this CAP program, because I have seen the success, was was so much more than any of us ever dreamed possible, that we need to put this in 200 cities across this. And the reason is not to grow. The reason is because it works. We're preventing kids from becoming victims of traffickers. We have all the documentation, we have all the numbers, we have all the backup. We collaborate with the law enforcement, we make sure our numbers jive with their numbers. So it's like, I don't want our team just to say, well, we're preventing. Well, we're preventing, but here's the documentation that proves that what we say, we're backing it up.
And I saw a quote from one of the police chiefs, I think, in St. Louis area, saying that CAP program, this child exploitation program, that program was the best thing that they had, and he was just singing the praises. So I know by talking to you that the same thing is happening in Grand Rapids. They're seeing great results. We're trying to get into the police department here in Colorado Springs. I assume that it takes multiple people in each one of these locations on staff to make this thing work. So if you had 200 locations, what your vision is, how many employees are you talking about having to have?
For the 200, it would be probably 500 employees.
So over 2 people per location.
Yeah, and because what happens, Andrew, is like when we start in one location, within 30, 60 days, I mean, it multiplies. It's like it explodes. Like, wow, there's this much going on that nobody's addressing. And so it's like, how do you shut those doors? I don't shut those doors. We have to just keep doing it.
And so, Pat, some of the people watching this may not think that we have that big of a problem in the States. What's your impression on the sex trafficking?
So people will ask me, well, how many victims are there? How many girls are being trafficked? And the only reasonable answer I can come up with, because you can't measure that. So it's like, well, how many people are drug addicts? You can't answer. You can't measure. A bunch. Yeah, more than we could ever help at the present condition.
Do you think that there's millions of kids being trafficked in the U.S.? I'm putting you on the spot.
I know.
But I just know from things that I've heard that it is a serious problem. It's not like just a few people in each location.
It's huge.
Lots of people.
Yeah, I mean, the internet, it has exploded. So the internet now is where they're groomed and trained and discovered and sold back and forth. And millions, you know what, to me, integrity is everything to me. And so numbers can really ruin your integrity. So I really try to shy away from that because I don't know the answer to that question. I know this, there's a lot more kids at risk, at high risk, who may be 1 or 2 steps from becoming victims. That's in the millions, I will guarantee you.
Well, I know that my partners, the people who watch this, they're people that love God and they're wanting to make a difference and stuff. And so you've got medical things, helping people, you're feeding people in Ethiopia, you're helping those that have been trafficked, and then even here in the States, you got a lot of things going. How could they get involved and be a part of what you're doing?
Well, one of the things we need is money. We need donations, and you can go online at crisisaid.org and make a donation online there. We're building like one of our pediatric hospitals. It only has room for 20 children right now, but we're building a second building that'll house 100 beds. We're going to put a state-of-the-art laboratory in there. We're going to put a surgical center.
Now, how much does something like that cost?
That's about a $6 million project right now. So we've raised enough money. It's going to be 5 floors, but we still got to finish it. We still have to equip it. But the thing is, there's no medical care in this area of the country at all. And this will be a pediatric hospital, but we'll be able to help adults too.
And so your program here in the States, how much do you spend on that? These CAP programs?
It's expensive in the States. We probably need $3 to $4 million a year to expand to where we want to go with that.
Wow.
So
I'm just guessing, you're saying $5 million a year is your budget, so you're somewhere around what? 300,000 per month?
Per month, yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah.
That's a lot of money for you and your wife to come up with.
It is. But God's been faithful, you know.
How many employees do you have?
We have, I think, 19 or 20 in the United States, or full-time, 3 part-time who are retired law enforcement policemen. And then in Ethiopia, we have almost 200 Ethiopians that work for us.
Wow, that's awesome. So I just want to say to those of you watching this that my ministry, we've supported Pat and Crisis Aid a number of times. We don't give on a monthly basis, but we have given some large offerings to them, and so we're supportive. And this coming Friday, of course, you'll be watching this after all of this is over, but this coming Friday, Pat is one of our award people that we're giving an award to from our Truth and Liberty, our Samuel Adams Award. And boy, what a blessing he is. And so I would just encourage you that you can go to crisisaid.org, and they have a lot of information there. I'm sure there's a place that you can sign up and become a partner. Mm-hmm. If you're interested in any of these programs, if you'd like to help us get a program like this started in the Colorado Springs area, which we have a number of military bases here, and the information that I have locally is that this is a high percentage of people that are trafficked in this area. And we're trying to get things done. We've had some resistance, but I think Pat's come up with a way to get around it, and so we're working on it. And if you would like to help, man, I just encourage you to go to Crisis Aid International, and I believe that this is a good ministry. I vouch for him. I've seen him. I've got other people that have been involved in it, and I believe it's a ministry of integrity, and it'd be a great place for you to give. Amen?
Amen. I totally agree with that.
You agree?
Yeah, I do.
Amen. I've never met your wife, Sue, but I'm looking forward to getting to meet her.
When she gets back up on her feet, I'm bringing her out here.
Awesome. So thank you, Pat, for sharing
with us. Thank you, Andrew,
with us.
for everything you've done,
That's awesome. And thank you for watching, and I just encourage you to become a part of this, because this is a big issue and there's not enough resources being put to it, and we have a responsibility to deal with this.
On this Inside Story, Andrew interviewed Pat Bradley, who birthed Crisis Aid International. Crisis Aid International was birthed out of the new life Pat experienced with Jesus. This ministry has grown supernaturally to draw people to Jesus through feeding programs and rescuing people from sex trafficking. To learn more about this great ministry, watch this video.
I had seen things during that time period. I mean, we were in the middle of the war zone, and it was genocide was taking place right in front of our eyes, and we saw things that were indescribable. We went to a makeshift village of people who had just escaped. Their village was attacked. They ran to this other village that was like 2 days' walk for them. And when we got there, it was about 75 adults, and just a few children survived. They had no water, no food, no access to either, and no clothes, and it was about 120 degrees. And it was obvious they would not survive the next few days. That was a turning point for me. It was just, I just knew that doing nothing was not an option anymore. And to begin, first of all, with myself, and to make a decision that, you know what, I am gonna do something, and I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna do something. And, you know, we came back and raised a little bit of money and went back to Kenya, bought food, trucked it up to this Sudanese border. We rented planes and flew it in and dropped it to where people were. And wherever I was, I just started and took the next step and took the next step, and God led it.
This world I see, it calls to me. I hear its voice, make my choice. Yesterday is swept away. Why don't we?
We rescue one more opportunity to refuse to do nothing. One more chance at a new future, in a new home, a new hope, a new life. One more family served. One more girl rescued in the safe home. One more hospital. One more water well in a community that has never had access to clean water. Thank you for being their answer, because you are saving lives, saving souls, and changing futures.
Hopes and dreams play in this wonderland. 'Cause
stories told, our lives unfold.
So what you see here all came from the death of a 4-year-old girl, the needless death of a 4-year-old girl. She died because she didn't have enough food. In the world and today, kids are still dying of starvation. But her death caused us to pull back and go, how can we address this issue that we prevent it, we stop these children from getting into here? And what you see here, we're on the 3rd floor of a pediatric hospital. That these people have no access to medical care at all, much less children. Everything that we do centers around the gospel. It's why we do what we do, is to bring the message of salvation. Our belief is that once we show people how much we care, then it opens their heart. One of the greatest needs a human being has is to know that they're loved.
In this wonderland, hopes and dreams play their themes here. In this
I see salvation, I see rescue, I see future, I see generations, I see absolute freedom.
It's just an awesome privilege that we get to be part of it.
Because without you, that wouldn't happen. Without that donation, this place wouldn't be here.
So really, you are an answer to their prayer.
We just hope you take a minute and just think about what God used you to do. Thank you.
to me, I hear its voice.
Special message from the producers of Inside Story, Karen and Ron B. Wright. Inside Story is moving to become a part of a new show, Grace and Faith Today, a Monday through Friday talk show on the new Gospel Truth Network. You can watch all 133 episodes of the original Inside Story show by accessing them on the awmi.net website. Watch video stories Inside Story.